The Governance Committee to order. We'll start with a roll call. Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Here.
Councillor Tabor.
Here.
Councillor Lombardi.
Here.
And I am Councillor Cook, and I'm here, and we have several guests today. We'll start with approval of the minutes. Did everyone see the minutes from the June 2nd, 2025 Governance Committee meeting? Okay, all right. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are approved. Today we're continuing our discussion on Chapter 1, Administrative Code Updates, the updated IT and HR language. And you will have seen in the memo that you received that not just these changes, but the entirety of the administrative ordinance one. So I'm going to turn it over to our deputy city manager, who's going to guide us through.
Yep. So as you recall, this has been an ongoing process to update Chapter 1, and in particular Article 1, the Administrative Code. So what we've done is we have two documents, and hard copies are coming down shortly from the legal department. Our apologies for that. So the first document shows the changes with the usual kind of strikeouts and red lines, so you can see what was changed from the old to the new. Some of it, as we discussed before, is housekeeping in terms of correcting titles to various departments whose names have changed, like planning and sustainability. In addition, and what we've been talking about for the last couple of months, is updating both the language for the Human Resources and Negotiations Department as well as the Information Technology Department. The language changes that we've been discussing, we've been looking to make them more in accord with the charter. So as we've discussed, there were some amendments to the charter in 2002, I think, off the top of my head. And those changes reflected an intention to be very clear that we should be looking for efficiencies, for more common ground in IT and HR across all departments. As we have sort of improved our resources on the municipal side, both in human resources and IT, I think it's really time to update that language in Chapter 1 in order to bring it in accord with the charter and the fact that we now have more resources. Now, we have had a number of discussions, and we've had documentation provided by the PD and by schools with regard to the legal authority to make the changes that we're proposing. And in short, let me start with school, which is the school here in the city of Portsmouth is a department. So a lot of the language that you will find in state law reflects schools that exist as a separate district. So consequently, it really is our charter, the city's charter, that determines the governance structure of this. Now, are there a few provisions that apply? Yes, we do have an obligation to provide a public education, and there are pieces within the state law. But in terms of IT and HR, we're comfortable from a legal department point of view with the language that is proposed. It's consistent with our charter. And we have actually looked at some case law. There's actually a case involving the city of Manchester. And you'll see at the back end of, some discussion on the court about how Manchester didn't do it correctly. There's a section where they talk about how Nashua, Rochester, and Portsmouth did do it correctly. There's a session law from 1905 that kind of started the process and gave the city of Portsmouth authority to have all this property and kind of sets out our initial structure, governing structure. And the court actually refers back to that. So that's why we're a little different, shockingly, right? And so that's why we're comfortable, and we can go through and cite the case law and run through that piece. And we didn't have time in the 2-week interim to do a formal memo, but we could certainly do that if if that would be useful either to the committee or to the full council at some point. So with regard to school, we think there is no problem with the language as currently drafted. And I think, I feel sometimes there's just a lot of concern, understandably, about control and authority.
We need somebody in the waiting room. Okay.
I'd like to think, here on the city side and on the school and in the charter departments, we have professionals. And I think if all the professionals are, rowing in the same direction, there shouldn't be a conflict. And we should find what's in the best interests of the city as a whole. So I think there's probably, unfortunately, a lack of maybe trust or enthusiasm, but as someone who likes to see us all pulling together and finding ways to maximize our efficiencies, to deliver the best service, I think this language that you see in front of you is part of that process. So again, we think we're comfortable with the language, both from a legal perspective and from a management perspective. And Ryan Babcock could not be here today. He's been out unexpectedly. So, but this is more in the legal and the management side of the house. So with regard to PD, again, it's a charter from our perspective that controls. And so there's nothing in the language that we have seen or in the arguments made that suggests that the language that's proposed and is before you today is in any way inconsistent either with state law or that is otherwise, not in the best interest of the city as a whole. And again, I think this is where if all the professionals got together and we recognize the same purpose, we're going to find our path through that is respectful of the unique environments of each. I know Ryan actually met with both school and PD to talk about incident response. And I think that is just the process that's going to keep going forward, which is we're going to have those conversations. And depending on, what budget you pass, the city council passes tonight, we're looking at a shared IT person. Again, looking for those commonalities and the way to pull together and kind of leverage our resources across all of the departments. And this conversation is going to keep coming up because of the move to a new financial and HR software system. So this conversation about how we work together is going to continue to evolve because we're looking at those opportunities across our platforms. So I will stop there and then Councilor Cook, however you'd like to take comments and
I want to ask a question first, does anyone else have a question first before I do? Okay. Right. My question is that as things evolve, are we comfortable with the new language for finance, for other departments? We've been mostly discussing human resources and IT, but we have the language for all departments in front of us. Are we comfortable that that language covers that evolution as well?
I'd like to think it's not going to be, there's already an intersection, frankly, with finance. So I'd like to think that it's going to be less problematical. Now, granted, right now, the school does do its own kind of accounting on its side of the house, and then there has to be some reconciliation, and Nathan could walk you through all of that, and happy to bring Nathan back to another meeting. But there's already conversation happening about how we integrate that more. And with the new platform, we're going to make it more seamless and hopefully easier on payroll, actually, because right now payroll is very cumbersome, both from the PD side of the house and from school and even municipal. It takes a lot of actually human labor to reconcile and run payroll right now, and we're hoping all of that becomes streamlined by putting everyone on the same platform, and we're going to have a lot more we may not need the same type of resources that we do now. In addition, we'll be able to run reports more easily, understand our data better. All of those pieces help people when they're gonna be across the organization. So Nathan has seen this, but it was several months ago before these conversations evolved. But I think he was fairly comfortable that we should have good buy-in because everyone's unhappy with the systems that we have because they're legacy and they're not efficient, and people are looking forward to having some of those efficiencies across the board.
And that language hasn't changed in the last few months.
Correct.
It was the initial changes and that's it.
Correct.
Okay. And today we're discussing this, kind of these final reiterations of the language. I think that we should make sure we go through those so that everybody is aware of what we're talking about today, because it's not the exact language changes, it's the language changes in, let's go back. I'm going back to the red line.
It has our last meeting though.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
This doesn't.
So, I want to make sure everybody can see those. The final iterations. So everyone who's at home knows too, and they have it up. And these were the language changes that we saw in our last meeting that were shared in the packet in the last meeting, so everybody knows this is that same language that we're
It is
discussing
that
today.
same language with the exception that I added the word department, or not department, development, there we go.
Exactly.
In response to the.
All right. We are back after a fire alarm, and everyone's okay. So we will go on with our discussion. I think we were just talking about the language that you have in front of you, which I have shared on the screen for anyone who's at home or anyone who's watching. This is the same language that we discussed at the last governance committee meeting. So everyone had received it then in the packet, so it was clearly noticed language. So everyone should be aware of that. So are there any questions from the committee? Of the language? If not, then I'm going to go ahead and see if there are questions from, we'll start with police and Commissioner Scher.
I'm curious, why was there a need for the, let me back up. The police IT stuff is very different from what the city does. So while I fully appreciate the idea of, are there ways, are there efficiencies in blending IT across departments that share functions and share practically speaking software and things like that? I had in reading the existing administrative code as to IT and charter department, particularly the police, I'm not sure what the need for a change was, what was missing in that language that is now present in the language that's been put forward in terms of efficiencies. For example, just as an example, well, I'll leave it at that.
I can speak a little bit to that. Ryan Babcock, our CIO, spoke to that to some degree at the last meeting, which is trying to have in part a single point of authority ultimately from our perspective of security across the system. We recognize, Ryan has clearly recognizes, the uniqueness of the PD system. There is no intention, to completely disrupt in any way the current sort of standalone pieces of the PD. This is about the longer term opportunities and also for the cybersecurity and how to deal with incident responses. It's also to deal with development, training, having a more cohesive sort of look across the organization. Primex, for example, is our provider for cybersecurity insurance, and any issue that we have, it reflects on all of the city, and ultimately the city manager and the city council will have to find the money if there's an issue that needs to be resolved for which we have not sufficiently budgeted or are insured for. And so it's really recognizing that changed reality. It is looking forward to the fact that we are continuing to roll out, as we will be with our new finance and HR software. There are going to be more opportunities across the organization to look for those efficiencies. So I think, what you heard from Ryan is just trying to be a point of leadership and responsibility, and rather than disrupting. I don't think that is really what we're looking to message. It is really taking advantage of the changing environment and how to grow us as an organization cost effectively in part as we look forward. It's also frankly more in accord with the actual charter, and we recognize that for many years the municipal side of the house was did not have the kind of IT infrastructure in terms of a team that exists today. And so it's reflecting that right now we are seeing a commitment by the recent city council to have a robust IT team and to take that leadership role and bring us in accord with the city charter.
Just one follow-up. My understanding is the police department IT people and the city IT people have been collaborating and cooperating as it currently existed. And when you say, when you use the term authority, that makes me nervous that that the CIO has authority over the police department, IT department. If that's what this change is about, I think that may have some charter issues there.
Think of it in terms of standards rather than people. So it's IT security standards and kind of operational coordination. And someone has to sometimes make final calls on operational coordination. So think of it less personal and more structure and standards, because that's what Ryan was really talking about, and making sure that if there's a threat at the PD, you know, how is Daisy going to report that to him? How are they going to communicate that out to, you know, Primex and then to the public and within the organization? So it's not about the people. It's actually about the structure and the level of coordination and opportunity that would exist.
Just to clear it up, it's not about the people. I think structurally it's been working well. And I just don't know, you know, I don't know that Ryan or anyone previous to Ryan, to the extent that person existed, had ever had any, I just don't know why we're, you know, if it ain't broke, I don't fix it.
If I could just add to that, I understand what you're saying, but why wouldn't that just be in a standard operating procedure, an SOP, rather than trying to change the charter?
So first, the charter requires us to have a chapter 1 that accurately reflects the organization. 2, when we think about governance structure and our obligations to spell out how each department functions and roles and responsibilities, we feel it's important to bring it up to date and to reflect, frankly, the amendments from 2002, as well as kind of where we see the organization evolving, and trying to make sure that we are not going to lose opportunities because departments get siloed. And that's part of what we're trying to kind of mediate against, because I think when we're all pulling in the same direction, we're going to find those efficiencies, we're going to find those opportunities for, I mean, we've had certainly municipal employees that have moved to the PD, you know, so we've got folks, school department, our finance department, you know, was, you know, filled for some time with folks that originally started in the school department. And if we're all working on, at least to the extent it's applicable and appropriate, on common platforms, that's going to make it easier for our folks both to help each other and to grow. And that's part of the other piece when we look at, you know, your ask for the development. You know, part of what we're trying to do is make sure when we have good employees that have a place to grow, that there's a path, and that path gets easier to the extent we have appropriate common platforms, and take advantage and leverage our each unique specialties. Because, you know, I think you heard Ryan perfectly understands there's a Google environment at the school. There's no desire to change that, but there is a very significant concern about how we talk about security, how we talk about how we communicate if there's an incident, how we report and respond to those things. So that's kind of the piece there. But I think it's not about the people, it's about how we respond and change to the changing circumstances.
One last question. So going forward, under the proposed language, who makes the call as to what platforms the police department use?
So I think that will be a continuing conversation with the police commission, to the extent it rises to that level, with Daisy, the chief, with IT. I mean, it's a conversation. I'd like to think smart people, professionals in a room are gonna wind up with the same answer. I think that's ultimately, you know, what we're looking for.
I can say historically that's not been the case. Police department, because of our uniqueness, have different needs, and we've always gone in the direction of our needs and what supports us best. What supports the city and its municipal departments doesn't. I use a completely different. I use most of the things that I use in our police department, the city is not using, except for the boilerplate common things like Office, Microsoft products, and so on.
And we don't disagree that there are pieces that may need to be unique, and I think Ryan understands that. And, you know, as CIO, there are different environments and you have different strategies for different environments. He's been working, you know, hand in hand with Mike Merrill on our SCADA systems, you know, water, sewer.
It's just the new language doesn't reflect that.
I think it does. I think it does. And the fact that you have water and sewer, you know, and those are need to be pretty secure environments, as we know. It's where we constantly see threats nowadays, you know, and he and Mike Merrill have a good working relationship. And I don't think, you know, that's all we're looking to do is make sure that those relationships are going to exist. But ultimately, you know, if Mike Merrill is really chewing over something, you know, what do I do? Ultimately, you know, it may well be that Ryan and the city manager and Peter Rice and Mike Merrill are all in a room and having a conversation about what's the right solution for the risk, or is it a solution we need to go back to the city council for because we need something that we didn't budget for? So.
I understand that. I don't understand why you'd be removing the charter language in that specific.
I think the language that we proposed is more in line with the amendments for the city charter. I don't think there's any question that there are unique environments throughout the city. Some are bigger than others.
But I think it adds ambiguity.
It does.
We disagree, but
Because, you know, this is good for 10 years. We, you know, a lot of us aren't gonna be sitting here in 10 years, so we wanna make sure that they understand the intent in the future.
Other concerns?
So I have kind of put some thoughts to paper, which I didn't do last time. So I wanted to kind of slide those around to folks. And I will apologize to both Deputy City Manager and City Attorney Farini. They got this less than 40 minutes before the meeting, only because I've been with the end of school, just had an opportunity to review some of the language, and then realized we were coming back with the same language. And I was like, "Ooh, I think and I want to respond to that a little bit." I also will just say to the council, I am to members of the council, I am not looking to be a nudge for nudge's sake, despite all the different things we're trying to negotiate right now. But the document that I passed around, I think one of the things I think about is that at the moment, all the professionals agree and work together. But when I think about these types of documents, they're designed for the moment when people don't agree. And what do we fall back to try to clarify who should be able to finally have authority? And I think Commissioner Scherb, you know, kind of pointed to that as well. This idea of a singular point of authority around these particular issues. And I understand the most efficient system is one that has less cooks in the kitchen. Democracy is not always the most efficient way to come to decision making. But I believe in my reading of, and I'm not an attorney, but in my reading of the statutes and the charter, I've not seen the specific case law that would change this. So I leave open the possibility that there's specific case law that we should look at. That there are elements in here that the school board would be relinquishing its authority under statute, which unless there's some specific other route to some other statutory power, that the charter wouldn't overwhelm statute. And then the school board would give up some of these different things that they should have control over based on statute. Which would include things like what platforms are we going to be on as part of their operational authority, my read under statute. The purchasing, the authority to purchase the things that we want to purchase, again, I think falls underneath RSA 189 and RSA 194. And these are things that within statute don't provide the city gatekeeping authority over those decisions. There's an elected board of 9 people who from the citizens of Portsmouth who are supposed to run the schools. again, we can look at that case law. So I included for you some, on the third page, just kind of the things that I see as potentially in conflict. That the language as proposed would require school district IT systems to comply with the standards over which the board has no control. The school IT procurement process would be at the approval of the city IT department, so the school board couldn't decide on a line item basis what it is spending money on. The city would gain control of that line item authority. And it then erodes some of the operational rights of the board to determine platforms, security protocols, and systems that might be deemed necessary by the elected representatives of the community to oversee the schools. So my suggestion is that this particular language could be included. Nothing in this section shall be construed to infringe upon the statutory authority of the school board as granted under RSA 189 and RSA 194. The school department shall retain control over information technology systems that support educational operations and shall coordinate with the chief information officer to promote alignment with best practices, provided that such coordination does not limit the school board's independent contracting and governance authority. That would be my recommendation, is that language finds its way in, that it will avoid conflicts in the future when all the people at the table now are collaborating and playing nice, but different people are going to inhabit those positions, and it's just a matter of time. In months, we can have different people in those roles, and different elected folks on the city council and the school board. And I would just, the last piece I just highlighted is just to think about in terms of the administrative code as a preamble to talk about this whole section of stuff that you guys are working on, and I'm trying to interpret that in relation to this conversation. And that lead off to this whole section of the administrative code says it is adopted pursuant to section 3.9 of the revised charter of the city of Portsmouth to outline the operation of the municipal government exclusive of the school, fire, and police departments. So those are my thoughts. I want to make sure they're out there. Again, my apologies to the deputy city manager and Senior Attorney Farini to not get them this in advance, because I'm sure they would have brought back that case law to look at and find detail. But I wanted to make sure this was part of the conversation, because the stuff that I can see at my level of expertise leads me to question some of the validity of the proposed language.
Do you wanna
Sure.
take first
Sure.
response to this?
So we did spend some time, Zach, looking at these issues after the last meeting.
Yep.
And there is a body of case law that talks about certain cities that have legislative authority to set up their school departments as city departments.
Mhm.
And specifically, it indicates that Nashua, Portsmouth, and Rochester are examples of those. And the originating legislation is, as Suzanne referred to, is from 1905 that set up the school department as a city department here in Portsmouth. And that authority, that's from a case which I can happily give you all the sites to later if you want. But from the city of Manchester, comes from 2004, but it was recently affirmed just last year in another decision. So where there have been battles in Nashua and Manchester about this authority. So it's our reading that since the school department is a unique department of the school, we consider it a charter department, but it is a part of the city municipal government, that the statutes, the ones in particular that you're citing to, the 194 statutes and the 189 statutes are not applicable because the authority of the school department and the school board run from the charter. So what's in the charter here under section 6 of the charter is really what controls in terms of the authority that's for the school board versus what most school districts
would use under state legislative authority. So that's what we looked at.
Mhm.
And I think that's what Suzanne was referring to earlier.
And we understand it's been a very busy time, which is in part why the legal department didn't have time to kind of grab some of this research that we had done actually following the last meeting, and get it to you in a formal memo form, precisely because we've all been rather busy, so we've been scrambling to try and answer these questions as they arise. But yeah, we understand it's been busy, so.
So when I read 6, I guess what I don't see is, having read section 6 before, I don't see a clear delineation of the relinquishing of authority that's laid out in statute. Like I understand the charter, if there's case law that allows the charter to then relinquish some of this authority that typically would go to a school board. I don't necessarily see in 6 the explicit relinquishing of those authorities.
That's just not the way the framework of the law works. So the framework of the law is that once you're a department, then it's all under the umbrella of 49C, and the government that we've chosen to have as a municipal government with a city council, and a charter. So as opposed to some other form of municipal authority, the selectmen, et cetera. So what you have under here, though, it does talk about, as you know, the control of the schools and the expenditures and personnel, but it doesn't specifically talk about IT or sort of the integrated functions of the municipal government. And so what we're saying is, because the charter isn't expressly addressing that here as a power and authority of the school board exclusively, that it can be integrated within the rest of the city government, particularly since you are a department of the city, and we're trying to find this overlap and collaboration between departments and with our resources.
I think my only concern would be that depending how you interpret that standard, I'm wondering how many other things, I think there's a rich conversation to be had then about what power the school board has at all beyond the 3 things that are listed inside of the charter, if that's the standard.
We certainly could go forward and have that conversation in another venue.
Sure.
Anytime, but I think, generally we operate with the school board as we always have. This is really talking about the Department of, IT and HR, the changes. And having some collaboration and oversight, which is, I'm not sure that really takes away from the school board. Control of the schools and, the curriculum, the education and the policies, and the budget process, et cetera, that we typically see from the school board. Yes.
I think it's our job as a governance committee to make a recommendation to the council. And we have language before us today. I would hope we could vote on it. But I think if we make a recommendation to the council, part of that would be a legal finding on, is this fully legal under New Hampshire law?
Go ahead.
I'm looking at, different than what Zach was talking about, but in vein of our empowering statute is RSA 105-C:4. It says the commissioners shall make and enforce all rules necessary for the operation of the police force in the manner most beneficial to the public interest. And we don't have the same funky status as that you're talking about with the school department. So I guess I go back to where I started out. It seems like the change is intended to move the authority for IT in the form of standards, that is rules, for the police department to the CIO. I think that is not consistent with our enabling statute, which gives the police commission the authority to make and enforce all rules necessary for the operation of the police force. And that said, I'm fine with the existing language. I don't think the existing language prevents the CIO from operating in a collaborative way in the way you've been talking about, and which I think is important. And I just the authority question really. The way I read 105C4, it's the police commission's authority. It's not the city council's authority to make rules for the police department, including standards, be it protocol or standards in IT. So I keep coming back to a long-winded lawyer's way of saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Can I request that we go over the charter votes from 2002? I think that's clarifying.
Sure.
And I was hoping, since those at home may not have looked at that, I think it would be helpful because these were votes taken by the residents of the city of Portsmouth, and they voted to make these changes to the charter in 2002. So.
So, as you are aware, let me just pull my memo here. We actually did write on this topic back in March of 2025. The city attorney and I looked at the city charter provisions relative to IT and human resources. And so we walked through sort of the evolution of the city's charter, where we have first that obligation, as the city attorney flagged, to spell out within our chapter 1, kind of build out the organization and the various roles within the departments. And what, I'll flip the page, and there is some broad language in the city's charter. So let's leave aside the state statute for a minute, because really, and having spent a lot of time with Bob Sullivan, looking at these, you have the state law, but then you have the further definition within each charter within a municipality that kind of guides and shapes that, as long as it's not directly contradictory, which I don't see this as contradictory. So we have our city charter, and it sets out, as you point out, under, is there even a section to it? Is Amendment E, to the city charter, where it spells out the commission, and the commission shall assume all administrative responsibilities which would otherwise be vested in the city manager under the charter relative to the administration of the department, such power to include but not be limited to the following: determine the number, location, and type of facilities and installations subject to the approval of the city council, to determine the size of the workforce and increase or decrease its size subject to the approval of the city council. And from my perspective, what you see is an emphasis on really patrol and facility, but there is broad language in the original drafting of this that talks about the administrative functions. You then get to the amendment in 2000, and section 7.23 of the city charter now reads: the administration the administrative code shall provide that a single municipal department shall direct acquisition, maintenance, and coordination of information management technology for all elements of city government, including the charter departments. So from my plain reading, if you read it in such a way that it's not contradictory, it doesn't take away any of the police commission's authority relative to officers and all of that kind of bread and butter work that the police commission normally does and is part of their regular responsibilities. But it is saying that when we get to IT, that there is going to be, back to the superintendent's point, if push comes to shove and someone has to make a decision, who's gonna make that decision? And it's clearly, we are looking to have that be within the IT department as it stands. So that's the
I understand what you're saying, but if you interpret that language to give the city manager, city council authority over rules for IT, that is in direct conflict with 104C.
And I disagree with that.
There we are.
Here we are.
It happens.
I think I think that's a fair thing. That's where we are, right?
Yeah.
That's where we.
And there's I can read the change for HR if you'd like, Counselor, for the record.
That'd be great.
And so, again, from November of 2000, Amendment F to the charter says, subject to the applicable provisions of state law and the relevant provisions of this charter, the administrative code shall provide for a municipal department which shall be responsible for the performance of those human resource functions of the city which are common to all departments. The Human Resources Department shall perform those functions for all city departments, including charter departments. Authority for performance of those functions unique to individual departments shall be determined in accordance with state law and the remaining provisions of the charter. And that's where I think that balance comes in, Commissioner, which is, recognizing that the commission is involved in the patrol, the sworn officers and kind of looking at those pieces, and there's an important role that I don't think the HR department is looking to assume in any way, shape, or form.
And I understand that piece, but I recoil at the police commission is just here about police, about patrol and things like that. That's not what our statutory authority says, number one. Number two, yes, that language is helpful in when the police department and the city are using the same software for a particular function, that it be coordinated, that common to language that does that. But a lot of the police department software, IT stuff, is different than anything else that the city uses. Even in HR, we use a different hiring software because all the people who are applying for jobs, for police officer jobs, use that software. Under the new language, the CIO can say, nope, we're going to use what the city uses for hiring. And that is, again, contrary to the language of the statute. Again, we're in the same place.
And I believe the workforce study that just came out kind of outlines all that, the uniqueness of our platforms within the police department.
Councilor Taylor?
I appreciate Commissioner Scher's arguments. Where does the line between policy and technical support fall? To me, the police commission and the administration control and make policy around what information goes into the computer and what comes out. You are looking for your systems to capture data that's important to your daily operations, to capture job applications that's vital to your operations. You would be in charge of the specifications of what you want your system to do. But then maintaining the systems, keeping them secure, keeping them running 24/7 should be a level below policy.
I agree exactly with that. And when you said it's up to us in the police department to identify the specifications and what we want, I think that means it's our role to decide what software to buy. It's the IT's department role to be involved in maintenance and security. I think that's how I would draw the line.
Well, I disagree on that to the extent that naming the software vendor may be different than really taking the time to clarify what information you want out of your system. We've just had a matrix study done. They had difficulty in some cases getting to information because the coding wasn't consistent. So, I think that's a whole area that the police department could profit from a good look at. But that's not necessarily running the computer. That's clarifying what you want your computer to do is very much the administration and the police commission. Maintaining the system, keeping it secure, I don't see as.
And I agree.
I think one of the challenges that, we've been discussing this for months on end at this point.
With the benefit of my not being here.
Sorry. But there's an assumption that, that the schools department, the police department, that they're unique and that they have different systems than other departments, but that is not the case in the city. The legal department has different systems. The finance department has different systems. We have different systems in many departments across the city of Portsmouth. So, and the IT department, which is what we've heard when the CIO has been here, repeatedly manages those differing systems and does not try to impose, I guess, decision-making above and beyond like what the legal department would make as far as legal systems. So I think that, some of this discussion is getting a little bit distorted based upon fears of what could happen. But what we're trying to do is find language, and we've been discussing this for months, find language that reflects what actually is happening and what the direction is from the charter of what we should have as far as language in the administrative code. And the reality is that this chapter in the administrative code has not been updated in years. So this started as an exercise to update Chapter 1 to bring it in line with current practice and with what the charter actually requires us to do. And we know that IT is kind of this hot button issue because for so many years, we didn't have the departments in place on the municipal side to actually come into line with the charter language that was adopted over 23 years ago now. And now we have all those provisions in place so that we can be in line with what our residents voted for. And so I think that's the really key challenge here is making sure when we here as the governance committee are adopting language, we have to make sure that any language we put in an administrative code has to be in line with our charter.
If I could propose something I think it gets to the essence of what Councilor Tabor and I have been going back and forth on. In the proposal, towards the end of the IT section, there's the sentence, all technology acquisitions must receive prior approval from the IT department. If that language were changed to say,
That language is already in that wording. It's in the HR one.
in the HR one, if that language were changed to say, must be reviewed by the HR department, rather seek prior approval, or must consult with the HR department, then I'm fine.
So just to add on that, like what you were saying, I understand that, but now the city's going to this new Tyler Technologies, and we are already being told that that's gonna be imposed on us and we need to go to that. And when we looked at Central Square, Tyler Technologies was the company we looked at, didn't fit our needs, what we wanted to do, you know, so there are softwares up there, and this language, in theory, could say what the council or the city manager say, well, you're going to that system. And it's not something we want because it doesn't do what we need it to do. Same thing with the HR software we use Police App. That doesn't kosher with Tyler Technology, but you can always build interfaces. Like we have interfaces with the legal department to make things work with our systems. And that's generally how 99% of these will work without imposing us saying you have to be on Tyler.
I guess to that, again, I feel like to echo, and I don't want to create an echo chamber, it just feels like we're living in a hypothetical fear that control is going to be shifted. But that exact example could happen within the commission itself. Like you could come to the commission and say,
We're there to find
we
it out.
want this and they don't want that. And you would come to a solution. So to me, you already have the framework that if that happened with the CIO, you would come to a solution. So I feel that there's a fear-based approach to this change of, well, what if we don't get what we want? Well, I would assume if the case is made well enough, as it would have to be to the commission, then we shouldn't have this. We shouldn't have this fear. And as has been said, there are different programs for water and sewer, and there has been no major change as it has flowed. No pun intended, flowed into the change of control of the IT. I understand the fear of things, but as I said a few meetings ago, all of these things feel like they can be rectified with standard SOPs. Within that, there has to be some type of standard SOP for conflict of escalation of management conflict. Of if you want something and Ryan is so adamantly like this does not work, which I don't see happening. I understand we can all say that no one in this room could be in this position in 4 years, but I think when you look at the charter review from 2000, it said that we are, with the advent of moving technology, that we are looking at some real structural shifts. I understand that the charter departments, it's a hard apple to bite, right? It feels like you're losing something, but I'm not looking at it that you're losing. Now, if we're talking about case law, then I think that's something we need to look into, which it seems that the city attorneys have looked into it. But I feel as if it has become a battle of the wills versus an actual integrity question of whether this can work. We're not the only municipality that runs like this. As we've talked about, case law has actually showed that we are one of the focal municipalities that the state has said we should shift over. So I just don't want us to get lost in the gritty of it feels like someone's losing power and the power is shifting. To me, we're looking at an umbrella and trying to make sure that there's genuine coverage. I mean, to me, I get the fear, I get the concept of what, but we could what all day. Now, if something did happen in 2 years, then this can come back for review. If something happened in 5 years and 10 years and we're not all in that room, much like the preamble from the conclusion and recommendations from the 2000 charter review, they recommended things to do in the future. We can also recommend things to do in the future. We are here because they recommended things to do in the future. So I just feel like we're not going to move forward in a way that's going to satisfy everyone. But if we can acknowledge that this isn't, the end of the world, I think that is where I would like to see us go. Where maybe there's a little bit more take. Maybe it's the wording of can consider. Maybe there's some type of wording shift where you feel like your opinion will not be automatically outranked, because that's what I feel like I'm getting a little, is that the commissions, the school board, the actual boots on the ground are worried that their opinion is not going to fly. There are going to be disagreements where you are going to have to pitch your programming maybe a little bit, because Ryan's not a police IT person, or a school data IT person. So there is a little bit of extra effort that we might have to go in, but I would say it's the same standard as if you had an all-new police commission that knew nothing about the software, nothing about patrol metrics, nothing, you know what I mean? There is that level of education that will have to come forward.
I agree with 99% of what you're saying, and I want not only the police commissioner, the police department to have to pitch Ryan, I want Ryan to have to pitch us.
Yes.
And by having consult language, they must consult on language rather than the final authority rest with Ryan. I think that solves it. And to be blunt about it, to talk about the elephant in the closet that it causes is legitimate fear in the part of the police department. A prior city manager was not fond at all of the police commission. And our fear is well grounded in a prior city manager, not this city manager, but a prior city manager trying to take over functions of the police department. So I don't want us to be perceived as just making stuff up out of whole cloth. That's where this comes from. And I think if you just put the consult language in instead of the final decision language, I'm completely fine with everything.
Councilor Lombardi?
Yeah, I have to echo that probably every department of the city has some unique software. And, one of the issues that Ryan spoke about is the overall security of the IT systems of the city. And if it comes down to it, if there's an attack on this city, no matter what department it is in, he's the person who's going to have his picture on the front page of the newspaper. Well, it's the Herald, so.
We'll strike that from the record.
Yeah. But I can understand his need to have some pretty clear influence over certain aspects of software selection, things like that. There are things that would affect the whole city if any one of these systems breaks. And I think that I don't have a problem with collaborative language. But I'm not sure. I think that there has to be some place in the city that does have oversight of the whole system. And I think that has to be the CIO.
And I think the language here, in the proposed language in information technology, gives that authority in terms of cybersecurity to the CIO. And we agree with that.
So I'm sorry, a point of clarification. So when you were just talking about the change of language, we were talking about the addition in the human resources and negotiation, correct?
Yes.
So the concern was all technology acquisitions affecting human resources functions must receive prior approval.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to clarify because it was already in the IT.
It's already in the IT one, yeah,
Yes.
no.
Yes, okay. So okay.
Just to speak to the security component that Ryan's concerned about, I've invited him to, we just had a CISA assessment. We did well in that evaluation. We're having our final evaluation next month, and I've brought Ryan in on that. I've brought Ryan in on all these standards that we have to adhere to, the Homeland Security, that the FBI provisions for us through the CJIS policy. So we're actually we're held to a higher standard of security. It's a little different on the city side versus the police side. So I've been trying really hard to communicate and show evidence of that to Ryan, and complete transparency to that, that we are meeting those
No, I think
policies.
It
that's
sounds like
great.
you're doing what we're asked to be done.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanna see.
And then but in the past, I would do that and, it would get misconstrued or,
Yeah.
it, you know,
We didn't have a department like
we
we
didn't have a
now.
department and, you know, so I feel like my voice was just not being
Shattered.
heard.
Yeah.
So what I did is I just followed what the FBI is telling the police department they must have, and we get audited. They'll come in, they wanna see a network diagram, they wanna see that we have, a CGIS policy splash screen saying, you know, you're going to get into data that is very,
And the city gets
protected.
audited too. I mean, you know, as a whole.
And that's where the specifications of what your system does for you is your province and the FBI's. But then getting a system to do it and keeping it safe, I think is the IT department.
So, I would, we're at the point now where we're kind of rehashing conversations we've been having for a long time. I wanna open it up to public comment.
Yep.
First on this issue.
Where would you like us to sit? Sit right over there.
Come
Okay.
sit up at the front.
So is the question, what's the front in this room?
It's, oh, that is.
there is not, it's a circle.
I know.
Nice, nice the round table.
So as long as you're at the table, you should be heard.
Okay, Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. And I guess in 2000, I was reading your amendment, and it says there in conjunction with state law. I have spent many hours in my career sitting at attorney conferences. And in all those conferences, it was pretty clear that federal law trumps state, and state trumps community law. And I can't wait to see the case law. I'm hoping it will be presented to us so that we know what we're looking at. I also was there when the city manager on city council tried to take the police department over in the commission. And we fought back, and there were some councilors that wanted that. And I did some research on the police commission. And one of the reasons the police commission was formed and made a state law is because the city government in Portsmouth was so corrupt that the state had to step in and help with commissions. So, you know, right now everyone's talking happily at the table. But there's a reason we have these commissions. There's a reason we have other elected officials. You know, I've been sitting here watching the city council give a lot of your rights to the city manager over this past couple of years, which I just cringe at. And I think that you need to have the separation of power. And it kind of comes along with the technology. I can't believe that we want to put everything under one silo in this day and age. I would almost think you would want to have bumpers up so that if the police department got attacked, it wouldn't affect the city. And if the school gets attacked, which we know has happened, I mean, we can go to our buddies in Manchester, we can go to our buddies in Nashua, and they lost everything. But because they kept it separate, it didn't affect the city of Nashua. So I guess I'm perplexed hearing this technology, why we are putting everything in one silo. Why are we making these connections between the things? Why are we having one system? Because that could be a huge explosion. And I heard up in Northwood, up in, up outside of Plymouth there, they got attacked. And one of the nice things was it didn't attack the community stuff because they were separate. And then they could go and get them to do payroll for them when that all went down. And when these people are attacking things, they're losing everything. Teachers are losing their schedules, their calendars, all their report cards, all their finances. So I guess I'm totally perplexed on why we're sitting here even talking about bringing everything together. The other thing I'm perplexed about is, if you don't honor the state law, which I've heard today, then now in our schools, and I'm sure the superintendent can help me with this one, we have this thing called Alma. And you can send your information into Alma, or you can abide by Alma and have Alma in your system. That state system, we have a NESA system, again, another state system. We have our retirement system, again, another state system. They all have different rules and regulations. They are in our bodies of law in different parts. Some of them are just in the Department of Ed and under our state school board, but most of them now have moved to state RSAs. We don't have a choice. And we're not going to have, he doesn't have time to have the discussion because he doesn't have a choice. The state has said, you are going to use this system, you are going to put all your data up, and we're going to manage it. And the federal government is going to take the information from this system because the federal government no longer wants for what we call Office of Civil Rights Data, or CRC, doesn't want to deal with each individual school. That has nothing to do with human resource enforcement. That has nothing to do with day-to-day runnings of budgets and water and sewer. So, I guess I'm perplexed why we're trying to bring this all together, unless it is a power trip, and maybe it is, and maybe that's what we're trying to do. And, I've seen it in the past. I was part of it in the past. We fought and we won to keep everyone separate. But I also can't believe today that you're telling me that we do not need to listen to our RSAs of the state of New Hampshire. I'm really having a hard time with that, folks, because it's very clear. And so I can't wait to see this case law. It is very clear that as school systems, we have to follow these RSAs. And every one of our little towns, villages, and other cities, Laconia, I know, has to follow the RSAs. And I can't believe they're not in the lineup. We have laws that we have to follow that surpass our communities. So I guess I'm really perplexed why we're having this conversation. I agree, if it's not fixed, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I also think if we're mature enough having a conversation, then why can't we have that conversation now? Why are we asking to change everything? Does that mean you don't trust the departments for having a conversation? So you all are asking to change this? I guess that's my question. You're asking them to trust you, but it seems to me you don't trust them. Thank you.
Pete Ruda, 280 South Street. I'm just going to echo and add on to what Esther has said. So it's just bizarre, or I don't know the word for this, but it's very clear that the New Hampshire RSAs and the city charter clearly define that elected commissioners of fire and police and a school board have the authorities of these departments. Now, I have the charter here, and I'm going to read the sections that we obviously have a different interpretation of, which still, first of all, I ask you to keep in mind, RSA gives us the power as a municipality, which is in the charter. We cannot, as a city, have something different because the RSA, my understanding, will supersede that. And it's RSA, city charter, admin code. So basically, if you put something in your admin code that disagrees with either one of these, it's not going to mean anything, and it shouldn't go forward. So, according to what everybody else said, it clearly defines in the charter, 6.3, that the school board is elected. It defines how do you elect officials. It defines the control of the school. My interpretation, the school board shall have control and supervision over public schools in the city of Portsmouth and may exercise such controls by means of a subcommittee or otherwise. Control over expenditures, all money appropriated in the annual budget to support the schools shall be subject to control of the school board, which shall have line item control over their budget. And next one, I don't have to go back and define that the superintendent of schools is the CIO of that. Now, when you go back and you look at your interpretation of the Human Resources Department and the IT department, it clearly says in the Human Resource Department, for one, and to the chief's point, that if they have unique individual department requires, which our IT person said, they report to different standards than the city municipality. And on that subject of IT, as someone who has worked significantly with different systems, the system that you're going to implement, no matter how it is, will not interface with police, school, or fire because they are totally different. And I would be surprised if it even interfaced with the rest of the departments that you intend to interface with it, because everything is different, and the hardest thing to do is get everything to line up in line when that's not going to happen. They're just too unique. Side note. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the police. And as Mr. Scheer said, this goes back to another RSA, Chapter 105C, and it was clearly established in the city charter back in January 1992. And it gives all the powers and duties to the police commission. So I guess if you think that our charter is any different on that, I will go back and read that. Amendment E, the commissions shall assume all administrative duties which would otherwise be vested in the city manager. Under this charter relating to the administration of the department, such powers shall include, and it goes down to define them. The commissions shall make such rules and regulations for their own proceedings and the administration of the police department as they deem advisable. So here it's actually telling you that the municipality cannot supersede elected officials. Basically what you're saying here is employed officials are superseding elected officials. And that's I don't know what to say about that. I mean, it's a direct contradiction to the RSAs and the charter. So the other thing about the actual IT stuff, basically the commission has the authority to do that. They have the authority to hire a negotiator. This is in the section on the bottom, which was adopted on November 6, 2001. And this is part of the annual budget. As far as having collaboration between the HR department and the IT department, I agree with Esther and I agree with Buzz. The collaboration is there. Are we trying to fix something that's not broken here? And as far as the argument of updating this, it's already there. We have seen through 2 meetings, and it was almost painful to watch the last one, where our IT person for police had to defend herself to basically this committee. They are doing it, they have been doing it, and they shouldn't have to come under and ask another department, which is not their reporting authority, to do this. So that's one of my problems with this. The other stuff, I also went through and looked at other stuff that we're not including and discussing here. And there's a lot of other stuff that I hope you would go over too, because I definitely have comments on if you go back through the administrative code and go through all the red that was in there, a lot of this stuff is very redundant, and a lot of this stuff, especially one, affects the power of the city council. And the one that I'm going to talk about is the emergency authorities. The emergency authority is actually given by the city council, and I don't know if I brought it. There is an RSA for that. And it's chapter 21P. And basically, Homeland Security and Emergency, you had this in your notes, you had the wrong number, but whatever. 21P39, Local Organization of Emergency Management. Number 2, until a local director has been appointed, the chief elected official, mayor, shall be directly responsible for the organization, administration, and operation of such organization. The top one that actually says the local organization, each local organization and management shall have a director who shall be appointed and removed by the county commissioners, the city council of the city, or the board of selectmen. So putting this in the administrative code is basically selecting the city manager above, and this is my opinion, above trained officials. Now, according to officials that I've talked to, the city manager is selected by the council, and basically the direct authority goes right to the fire officials, which is fine, which I think is great. The fire officials train, so do the police officers train for this. So my question is, why are you putting this in the administrative code and taking it out of the control of the city council? This adds another layer, basically, and in an emergency, I don't think we want that. The city council should have the authority to say, I want trained officials in there, and I would like the police chief to take over immediately when this happens. That's just my opinion. So, in closing, I think there's some confusion here on what the state law says and what elected officials do govern their departments and charter departments. And as Esther said, I think a lot of the stuff in here is trying to take all of the control out of elected officials and put it back into employed officials, and that is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment? I know that there was someone on Zoom. Just want to double check. I'm not hearing from him, I believe. This is James Davis.
No, it's fine.
Is that yours? Okay, all right. So then, I won't worry about that. Yes.
Very briefly, I circulated everyone, I think but you has seen it, council members, a proposal to add to the human resources section language that captures, as to charter departments, the consultation idea rather than the approval idea. When you pass that down to and it's an addition rather than a replacement, because I think the all technology, the last sentence of section F needs to be there for all the non-charter departments. So this would be another sentence that just covers charter departments and requires prior consultation. My guess is, I think that would work, and it would, I'm sure the deputy mayor's view, it would require the police commission to pitch the CIO and require the CIO to pitch the police commission.
I want to ask, first of all, since we've been considering these changes for months at this stage, and this language was duly noticed in our last meeting for discussion, whether or not even the council members want to entertain a change, or whether or not they're interested in doing this.
I would entertain a motion or second a motion, partly because it feels as though this may move us a step closer to resolution. And this is language that I actually could see within council discussions being brought forward.
Deputy City Manager.
So let me suggest this. If it would be, we could do a couple of different things. First, I think it might be helpful if you had something in writing, as we talked about, from the legal department summarizing kind of all of the statutes that we've looked at and how they are typically, because you have sometimes broad statutes in state law, but then you have defining features within city charters and further defining features, walking through the ordinances and how those typically interplay. And that would be helpful to get that in writing. Second, I am cognizant, and this is why I'm careful about what we want to do in the language, and you raised a good question about finance. You know, the language, are we really thinking, you know, have we covered this? Because we know that the software that we're anticipating, the new platform, financial and HR platform that we're looking at, is used by police departments. It is used by, you know, schools, not for like the Google stuff. There are so many different, when we talk about the pieces, the technology pieces, there are multiple within every department. And so the trick is always to find which are the ones that are common and appropriate to scale and which are specific to that department. You know, Daisy has a whole slew within the police department of stuff that only police officers and their dedicated, you know, crime personnel are going to use. You have pieces of software in finance related to motor vehicle registrations that only people within finance use and no one else. And then we've got pieces like hopefully our new financial software that everyone is going to be using to be able to be on the same platform and see what we're spending, be able to run appropriate reports. And then there are pieces within each of those, and we are going to have a discussion when we get there 2 years from now about what the options are, about the other pieces like timekeeping and other record keeping and how we do our payroll and how we do our applications and HR processing, where, you know, how our personnel records may be differently handled than they are handled today. And it's probably going to be a multi-year evolution discussion. And of course, those tools, those IT tools, change over time. So I do think there has to be some final decision maker, you know, to Zach hit the nail on the head. At some point, there's going to be a recommendation, and two people are not going to, you know, reach an agreement, and who is ultimately going to make the final call. So thank you for calling it as it is. You know, most of the time I think we are generally on the same page because we sit down together, we make our arguments to each other, and we reach the same answer. But I can tell you right now, if, you know, heaven forbid, some department, and let's assume it's not even a charter department for the moment, if some department says, oh, I love this piece of software, and Ryan and his team, they vet every new piece of software to see, is it secure enough for our environment? Depending on which environment it's sitting in, of course. He is not going to authorize that purchase and installation of a piece of software that has a security flaw. And I think that is kind of what we are talking about. And it's just, we need as many team members, given the current environment, as we can get. Putting the heads together and looking at the reports that come from, you know, our security professionals. We have, you know, water and sewer tests as well for security. So there's this going across the platform. So I would be careful. I'd rather be thoughtful about how we amend or don't language kind of on the fly at this moment. I'd almost rather it, if you're going to amend the language, do it at the city council after you have all of the documentation and you've got a chance to really think about it and tee it up, just because I've been running all of this language by the folks who are going to have to live with this language, trying to share it with the school and police in advance. And of course, fire is folded in right now anyway. So it's really, you know, police and schools. So that's just my thought. Councilor Tabor.
I should make explicit what was implicit. I was saying I was ready to make a motion. I was going to move that we recommend to the council that we adopt the language that was in the packet today for the administrative code. And then if the discussion wanted to amend, we could do this.
What is the process for putting forward a amendment to this, putting forward what I just wrote to the city council? Do I have to get a city councilor to put that language forward, to make a motion to put that language forward? Can I, in public comment, put that language forward? I'm just curious how that works.
So the process at city council is that you have to go, any ordinance change goes through 3 readings. And so those amendments can be made by a city councilor at any, at the first reading or second reading, and then if there's an amendment at second reading, it usually has to come back for another second reading. So it can go through second reading a few times if there are changes at that stage. But yes, the city councilor has to make the amendment.
Okay.
But you can request it. You can request it in any way you like. You can request it via email. You can request it in
Send
public
an email
comment.
to the city council saying,
Yeah, you can send
I
an
request
email.
this. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's so that process is fairly fluid, and we get into city council discussions. A lot of times there are amendments that are made by city councilors in these discussions. I think the concern is that here we've had the same discussion repeatedly for months on end, and at this point we need to see where the council stands rather than just continue the discussion at this level, and see how the council feels about moving forward or not moving forward. If the council wants to make amendments, or if anyone even here that is on the council wants to make an amendment, we can do that. So
And when does this come before the council?
it won't come to the council probably until August, is my guess. So
Okay.
if it moves on here from here, if this committee wants to move it forward, that's,
Okay.
it won't be at the council for,
Thank you.
yeah, we only have one meeting in July, so
And it's a
it's
pretty full
pretty
agenda
full,
already.
yeah. So, yeah,
So I could go ahead and make a motion that the governance committee recommend the council approve the changes in chapter 1 of the administrative code as presented in today's packet, with a finding on the legality of these changes with the charter.
Requesting a legal opinion to accompany it.
A legal
when it
finding,
comes back.
yeah.
is there a second?
I'll second.
And if I could just speak to it.
Yes.
I think the 2002 charter change is crystal clear. One IT department and HR department for all parts of the city, including charter departments. They spell it out. So I think if we follow that intention, and correct me if I'm wrong, that went to the voters, right? So that was the will of the voters, regardless of who's elected in 2- and 3-year terms. We've tried it with the fire department. We've seen positive results. This council that I've been on has every budget cycle said, can we get more integration of IT? And we've invested in an IT department, and frankly, I'd like to see a return on the investment. And I think that can happen. I do think you need a decider. I do think it should be the CIO. I think it's unfair to ask the CIO to have the responsibility and not have it.
Any other comments? Is everyone ready to vote on this?
Are you?
Everyone else is ready? All right, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Great. All right. The next item for discussion today, and I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank everyone for being here and for sharing views, and I want you to know that it'll come to the council in August, and there will be plenty of more time to comment at the council. So, thanks. Next item, I want just a really brief update on where we stand with special event permitting, because it's taken a lot longer today than we anticipated.
Of course, that would be me, I guess.
Yes.
So very briefly, OpenGov is actually pushing out a special event permit and is going to help do a demonstration here. And we've also started to design one ourselves. So just know that that we are going to compare notes, as it were. We're looking at other communities, and that we will be able to bring forward a special event permit once our departments have been included. And each department will kind of make some recommendations as to the permitting process itself. We will be creating a workflow before the final document comes out and consult with our department so that we can do that. Very briefly on the encumbrance and the comparisons for other major cities like us. We are not alone in doing some research that the authority is interspersed through various chapters for encumbrances. If we do everything in one chapter, we will be the only one as compared to Dover, Rochester, Manchester, and Concord. So there are different authorities. Many have licensing boards and licensing officers. Two of them have wonderful landing pages that list every single permit known to man. None of them link directly because your dream has not come true yet, Councilor Cook. But it was good education to kind of see the structure of how these other municipalities did it. And I know we're running late, so I will come forward with more solid information on that and a more robust document to look at our next meeting in July, if that is helpful to the committee.
When do we have a reminder date of our July meeting?
July meeting, let me double check the calendar, so that everyone is aware. I believe is, so same day as the council meeting is what I have?
14th.
The 14th? Yeah.
Is that okay with the committee?
Does that work for everyone?
Yeah, it's going to be a heavy council meeting too, right?
That is a heavy council meeting, but we'll be discussing only encumbrances, not.
Yes.
We won't be continuing the discussion we have been having for the last several months.
Okay.
So it shouldn't be a heavy governance committee meeting, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
So is everyone okay with that? Okay. All right, and we might not have a second meeting in July.
Yeah.
That way everybody just has to be here for the one council meeting and the one, okay?
Great.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, I really appreciate it. I don't think we have anyone else here for regular public comment, and we've already settled when the next meeting is. Is there any other business? All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.